Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Noble from the National Weather Service office in Missoula, and I'm going to be looking at the March climatology, looking at some cold temperatures and looking at the forecast as well. Key points are there is a possibility for at least an Arctic intrusion in early March of 2022, especially from March 5th to the 11th. This presentation will look at some of the climatology of the coldest highs and coldest lows for each county in our region for March. We'll be looking at extreme cold and what kind of pattern do we need for the extreme cold cases. We'll look at Kalispell and we'll look at how many hours of cold temperatures that Kalispell has seen in more of the recent years and look at how some of those years have shown up a lot in the recent Climate Prediction Center analogs. And we'll look at some recent analogs, matching patterns for early March by looking at temperature and precipitation composite maps. And then we'll look at some recent Arctics for late February into early March and looking at their evolution via some 850 millibar temperature charts, which is approximately 5,000 feet mean sea level. So the official forecast from the Climate Prediction Center is showing below normal temperatures. This is the March 5th to the 11th period for the Northern Rockies. And also Western Montana has a above normal chance for precipitation, and North Central Idaho has near normal chances for precipitation. So here's a model forecast of the upper level pattern for around this March 6th period. You can see a large ridge of high pressure, northeastern Pacific, extending into Alaska, with northwest flow over our region, which is a good pattern for potential for Arctics to come down here. One thing to note is that the polar vortex is well to the northeast of Hudson Bay. That may not bode well for the more extreme cases of cold for our region. We'll get into more of that later. So let's look at some extreme cold cases, and we'll start with the coldest highs, and we'll look in Idaho for March. So here's Clearwater County, and here are the highs, the coldest highs for March. And you can see 11 degrees, the Cool Creek Snowtell. As far as a populated location, the Pierce Co-op showed 23 degrees for the coldest high. That happened on March 4th of 1989. Looking in Idaho County, the coldest was 2 degrees in Lolo Pass. That was on March 1st of 2014. Looking at Riggins, 26 was the coldest high in 1906. That was March 15th. One thing you might notice is that a lot of these cold dates happen in early March. So as you get later in March, a chance for these more extreme temperatures lessens. Let's keep going for Lemhi County. The coldest highs are in the teens generally. For like the Salmon Airport, 14 degrees. That happened in 1960. Looking at Salmon proper, at the radio station there, 17 degrees. That happened on March 2nd of 2014. Going into Montana. So here's Deer Lodge. The coldest was Anaconda, 4 degrees. That happened in 1906. Going to Flathead County Summit, which was Marias Pass, the coldest high was 21 below. That happened on March 6th of 1951. Looking down at Kalispell, 2 degrees. That happened on March 2nd, 1960. That was a pretty cold day. West Glacier, 4 degrees. That happened in 2014. Granite County, we're looking at 2 degrees for the Phillipsburg Raws. 5 degrees at the Co-op station. That happened in 1960. Lake County, St. Ignatius, 9 degrees. That happened in 1896, March 3rd. But more recently, we have like 11 degrees at 2002. That was at Swan Lake. And also Jet, the Raws there, the coldest that it reported was 12 degrees, and that was from the 2014 Arctic case. Lincoln County, 7 below Hawkins Lake, Snowtell, 6 degrees at 9 miles northeast of Yak. That happened in 2014. Here's a 2019 case, Eureka. 11 degrees was the high. This is early March. Mineral County, 4 degrees, Hoodoo Basin Snowtell, 9 degrees at Haugen. These are all 2014 cases. And then how about in Missoula? Sealy Lake, 5 degrees. That happened in 1960. Lindbergh Lake, same year, 5 degrees. The airport here in Missoula, 5 degrees, 2014. 9 Mile, 6 degrees. Potomac, 9 degrees. Powell, 5 below. There was at the North Fork Elk Creek Snowtell. That was in 2014. The Co-op in Deer Lodge had 1 degree for a high, 2019. How about in Ravalli County? Hamilton, 5 degrees, 1960. We have 11 degrees, Stevensville. That was in 1960. Looking at Sanders County, and we have 12 degrees at the Plains Raws. That was in the 2014 case. Some of these stations have a short period of record, as you can see. This one started in 2002. And in Silverville County for Butte, 2 below was the coldest high for the month of March. That was March 1st of 2014. Okay, let's look at coldest lows starting in Idaho for the month of March. Pierce had 10 below in March 4th of 1989. The Vorjak Fish Hatchery north of Orofino had 10 degrees for a low. That was in the 2019 Arctic case. Looking at Idaho County, 23 below Savage Pass. That was in 1989. Dixie had a 13 below. That was on March 3rd. This is Dixie North, which started in 2008. Lolo Pass had 9 below in that 89 case. Riggins had 3 degrees. That was in 1906. Fenn had 11 degrees, March 3rd, 2019. Looking at Lemhi County, the coldest low temperature was 10 below at Leadore. Looking at Salmon proper, 3 below in 1976, March 3rd. How about Montana? The temperatures go even colder because the closer to the Arctic air masses. Anaconda, 21 below in 1920. Marais Pass had 42 below in 1960, March 2nd. Looking at Creston, 32 below, that was in 1960. The 2019 case, Polbridge, was 38 below, March 3rd. For Granite, the coldest was 31 below. Peterson Meadows, Snowtell, Phillipsburg, 25 below. This is from 2019. Lake County, 17 below at St. Ignatius. Lincoln County, 30 below at Yak. That was in 2019. That was a pretty cold one. Eureka had 23 below on that date, March 3rd, 2019. Mineral County, 27 below in Haugen. That was in 1955. 12 below in Alberton, March 5th, 2019. In the Missoula area, Sealy Lake had 42 below in 1945. That was pretty cold. Potomac had 37 below, most recently in the 2019 case. Missoula Airport, 13 below. That happened in 1955, March 5th. For Deer Lodge, 29 below was the coldest. That happened in 2019. Looking at Ravalli County, Stevensville had 19 below in 1922, March 1st. And Hamilton was 14 below. That occurred in 2019. Sanders County, Huron, had 22 below in 1955. Plains had 14 below in 2019. And for Butte, 36 below in 1948. So pretty cold, and that's March 10th. What type of pattern do we need for extreme cold for our region? Like I said earlier, in this forecast, it has the polar vortex way up here northeast of Hudson Bay. For us to get more extreme cold, we'd like to see that polar vortex to be closer to like the western side of the Hudson Bay. That places us in a better direction for the cold air to come straight out of. Also, it places a trajectory of cold coming from Siberia in that same area. Right now, we're not sure exactly how it's going to evolve based off of this pattern, but there is that low probability that it could occur. All right, so this is a lot of information here, but what I did was I counted the number of hours where the temperature was less than 10 degrees at Kalispell. And then I sorted it by the most amount of hours less than 10 degrees and what year that showed up. So in March of 2002, there were 114 hours when Kalispell had a temperature of less than 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And 2002 has shown up in the recent Climate Prediction Center's analogs. 2019 is not in the analog algorithm, but that is a potential pattern for us for March. 89 has shown up as well. 2009, 1955, 85, 65, 64, 91, 97. It's interesting that a lot of the analogs that have shown up to match the pattern for early March of 2022 had cases where Kalispell had a decently cold number of hours. On the right side, we're looking at the hours between 10 degrees and 15 degrees. It's kind of a similar deal. Some of the most amount of hours that showed that temperature threshold has shown up in the recent analogs. And here are the hours less than 20 degrees. And it's kind of a similar story. These are just counts of how many times these seasons have shown up in the analogs. The 84-85 season was a La Nina season, and 46 instances in the analogs. I guess overall, what I'm trying to say here, there is a chance that there could be a decent amount of hours where we're in the single digits and teens if this Arctic intrusion were to happen. All right, so this is looking at the temperature departure from average at the 5,000 foot level, or what we call the 850 millibar pressure level. The blue is showing colder than average. And so these dates that I chose have shown up in the CPC analogs, and it shows that potential for Arctic intrusions for Montana. How about for precip? If you take some of the March dates that have shown up in the analogs and you make a composite, you take an average of like the precip rate departure. So this is showing lower amounts of precip rates over the coastal areas, Pacific Northwest, and showing a slight increase in the chance for like precip rates for Montana, specifically like eastern Montana. It's not a strong signal for precip. If we get one of these waves that comes through that brings Pacific moisture over us and we have the Arctic air, then we'll get the precip. So lastly, we're just going to look at a few recent Arctic cases. This is from February, March of 2019. What you're looking at is temperatures at approximately 5,000 feet. This is in Celsius. So anything kind of colder than like -8 to like -12 Celsius is a decent threshold for where the Arctic boundary is. So I'm going to go forward. So this is 15th of February going forward. The Arctic came towards Glacier Park, and then it came through western Montana and parts of Idaho by the 17th. And -20 Celsius is pretty cold air mass. Then we had residual cold, and then it was kind of quiet, and then another push, glancing below. And then by the 23rd and 24th of February, another Arctic came down. That one just barely got into like Clearwater County. Much of the colder air was to the east. And you can kind of see the coldest air up in Canada west of Hudson Bay, and that trajectory was more to the south and east. But the Arctic air kind of stayed over northwest Montana a few days after that. And then another push happened in early March, and that was pretty cold. And as you can see, it came all the way from kind of northwest of Hudson Bay. That one made it into north central Idaho. You can see on the 3rd. And then we had some pretty cold nights during that event. All right, so and lastly, I'm just going to show you kind of what happened in 1987. This is a date that showed up in the CPC analogs. On the left side is like the upper level pattern, and you can see the ridge is shifted further east, centered over like British Columbia. And the polar vortex is, or the southeastern part of Hudson Bay. We didn't really get any Arctics with this. We just got some cooler air. But because the ridge was a little shifted to the east, that kept the Arctic air heading into Montana. So this is still within the realm of possibilities of what could happen in March. So all in all, bottom line, there's a chance for some Arctic intrusions March 5th through the 11th. Right now, we're not really seeing that pattern that we need for the extreme cold. And there's a chance for some precipitation, especially along the divide, as in the climate prediction forecast is showing that. And as you can see, a lot of the more colder events seem to occur in early March, like that first week in March. And then the probability for the coldest events really drops as you head into later March. I hope this was useful for you. If so, please let us know. Thank you very much.